All right, good evening and welcome everyone. This is James Orr and we are starting about 1 minute early. So for those that don't know, this is a presentation on bookkeeping and accounting of all things, and for real estate investors, for Nomads specifically. And this is based on actual polling our existing clients and investor club members up here. And I'm trying to find the sheet that I used. Here it is, where we actually polled everybody. So we went and we had everyone mark down what their favorite classes they'd like to see are. And of all the classes that are out there, bookkeeping and accounting, it like shocked me, but bookkeeping and accounting is the most popular class that people wanted. So I would never have thought to teach this class, but that's what you guys wanted. So Brian has actually made a presentation on bookkeeping and accounting, and I've been recovering from a really bad cold over the weekend. For those of you that are familiar with my voice, you will notice that my voice is probably off a little bit tonight, and that's because I'm recovering from that cold still. But I'm going to be presenting Brian's presentation primarily on bookkeeping and accounting for Nomads. Jason is preparing. He's doing like a really big 3-day event with his CPAs and attorneys and stuff like that, and so he is not going to be with us tonight, although he would have been a great one to have on because he's an enrolled agent with the IRS and is all into bookkeeping and accounting and stuff like that. So the website for tonight, the class will be posted up here after, learntoberiich.com/bookkeeping and accounting for Nomads. The video will go up there for premium Nomads. The video will be available for about a week afterward for the everyone to watch live, and that's at learntoberiich.com/meetup. All right, so without any further delay, if you guys are on the call live, feel free to say who you are and where you're from in the webinar chat window. And then what do you currently use for keeping track of income and expenses in your real estate business? So what do you currently use for your bookkeeping and accounting stuff? So I'll start off. I'm James Orr here from Fort Collins, Colorado. And for me, I primarily use accountant. So we have our accountant do all of our stuff. The partnership stuff that I'm involved with, I'm involved in a bunch of real estate partnerships. Those are all the bookkeeping and stuff like that is kept track of by the partner who is running the partnership. That is not me. And then we send those over to the accountant and the CPA to actually do all that stuff. So that's what I do. If anyone else wants to share what they're using, you're welcome to do that, and I will mention those in the Q&A or the chat window. Either of those work. You guys are welcome to do that. So upcoming classes. So the classes that we have scheduled for next Tuesday, there's a class on return on investment and return on equity. That's actually going to be a really good class. That's a class where we look at when you analyze what the return you're getting in, or the return you're getting on the initial investment you make when you invest in rental properties, and specifically when you do, Nomad stuff, and what happens to your return when you consider that the equity in the property is building up. If you imagine for a minute, here's the value of the house, and the small amount is the amount you put down, because a lot of times we're putting down nothing down, or 1% or 3% or 5%. So you put down a little bit at first, but over time, the property value increases. So that increases your equity, and the amount that you owe on the property, the debt balance you have actually goes down, and so your equity tends to increase over time. It tends to get bigger. And so if you think about the return you're getting on the equity as the property values go up and the amount you owe goes down, the return you tend to get on equity over time goes down. And so when we look at Nomad, especially because we're putting so little down, the return we're getting is phenomenal. I mean, it's significantly better than we're seeing with traditional real estate investment properties. But return on equity over time goes down. And so we're going to look at some of the challenges you see with return on equity and some solutions we have for dealing with that, decreasing return over time and what it actually looks like. And so it's actually a pretty interesting class, especially for the engineer types, which is tends to be a lot of the Nomad people. A lot of the Nomads tend to be engineers. So that's going to be a really good class. And that's next week, August 29th, 6 to 8 p.m. Today is August 22nd, so that's a week from tonight. And then originally on September 5th, I had kept it open as a kind of flex class in case for some reason I needed to add a particular topic that I forgot to add, or we had a delay, technical difficulty or an issue where I had to move a class. That was sort of my kind of recapture day. Turns out I haven't needed it, knock on wood, and we won't need it next week. But as of right now, there is no topic scheduled for September 5th, which happens to be, I think, the day right after Labor Day anyway. And so why not just take that night off? And so technically, we don't have a class scheduled for September 5th. If we do need to make up a class or something like that, we will do it on September 5th. But as of right now, we're probably not going to do anything on that night. Then the week after that, September 12th, Legacy Nomad Overview. Legacy Nomad is the type of nomad that I'm doing. If you have kids, I have actually a 21-year-old child, and then a child going on 19, and actually in a month. And so I have 2 kids that are college age. As soon as they get out of college, they're going to go out into the world, get jobs, and they're going to want to do Nomad. So we are going to help them do Nomad by gifting them down payment money. So imagine, my oldest son gets out of college, gets his first job, and then we have him buy a home with little or nothing down. In this case, it's going to be little down, and we will gift him the down payment that he needs, the 1%, 3%, or 5% that he needs each time he wants to do a property. As long as he continues to move each year and do whatever it is, we are going to continue to gift him money. And Tammy and I can each gift him, I think it's $14,000 per year per each of us. Tammy can give $14,000, I can give $14,000 per child. So we can give, our oldest son $28,000 a year, up to $28,000 a year, tax-free to him, as a gift, and use that as Nomad down payment so that he can start acquiring rental properties. We can get some assets out of our estate and start doing some estate planning early, teach them the responsibility of managing their money, becoming good stewards of managing the properties and understanding how the investment works. And then over time, when we pass, they will inherit our rental properties and be able to start managing those and understand what they are versus trying to liquidate them immediately as soon as we pass. So the idea is, you gift money, and you could do this, for your grandkids. We probably will do this for our grandkids too. When our grandkids graduate from college, we will start gifting them money for down payments and help them do the Nomad model and acquire rental properties that way as well. But for our kids, we'll just do it for 10 properties or however many they max out at, whatever that works out to be for them. Maybe it's more than 10, maybe it's less than 10. It's really up to them. So that is going to be all about Legacy Nomad Overview, how that all works on September 12th. That's what that class is about. And this other class, it's actually going to be the second time I've ever taught it. It's called the Emergency Plan Workshop. And the idea behind that class is, you wake up one morning and you get hit by a bus. And so what do you need to relay to whoever it is that's going to step into your business and take it over? Where are your leases located? What's the contact information for all your tenants? Where do you bank? Where do you deposit the checks for this? Where do you pay the mortgages out of? All the things that somebody who were going to step in and take over for you, even temporarily, if you get injured or sick for a week or 2 or 3, who's going to step in and take care of all that stuff? And so the Emergency Plan Workshop kind of walks you through all the different considerations you have of, how do they get access to your email if your computer's locked down? Where's the login and password for that? Where's the login and password and the information for all your banks? And if there's an insurance claim, this could be a temporary issue that you have for a week or 2 or so, or it could be you really do die. And then so, how does your spouse step in or your business partner step in and actually run the entire business if you are no longer around? And so that is basically what the Emergency Plan Workshop is all about. It's that planning process. And I would recommend you come prepared to start doing your own planning to document your process and stuff. It was a really good class the first time we taught it. I think it's going to be even better this time because I've made some kind of notes on things to change when we taught it last time. I'll go through the last presentation when I taught it. I'll update some of the slides with some additional information, and we'll kind of make some adjustments. So that's scheduled for September 19th, and we'll plan on doing that. If you want to see the rest of the schedule for classes, you can go to learntoberiich.com/schedule and access that there. So what is Nomad? These classes on Tuesday nights are primarily Nomad classes. And so what is Nomad? Nomad is you're buying a home and you're buying it as an owner occupant. You have to move into the property. And the reason we're willing to do that is we get a little bit better interest rate and you can buy a property with less down. So the owner occupant loans, you can buy property with 0% down for VA, for USDA. You can do 1% down for conventional financing. You do 3% down for your second and third properties. And then for properties after that, it's usually 5% down for conventional financing. So when you start thinking about that, compare that to the, at a minimum, 15% down you would need to do non-owner occupant single-family home properties, or 20% down if you're trying to avoid PMI. These are ways that you can acquire a much larger portfolio of rental properties with less down payment. And so we do that. We agree to move into the properties, and you do move in. If you don't move in, it's loan fraud, and we do not recommend you do that. We recommend that you actually move in, honor your agreement with the lender. Your lender is part of your dream team, one of your partners in kind of these transactions. And so you move into the property, you live there for a year. That's the paperwork that you're going to sign when you get your loan. You're saying you're agreeing to live in the property for a full year. And so you are going to honor that, live there for a year. Then toward the end of the year, you're going to start looking at putting a tenant or tenant buyer, whichever way you decide to go, in the property that you're currently living in. That'll start after the year is up. And then you're going to start looking for another property to buy for you to move in again, and kind of repeat the process until you get the number of rental properties you want. Some people, it's going to be 1. Some people, it's going to be 10 plus. Some people are going to alternate between their spouses and each have each spouse get 10 properties in their name, because that's usually the limit before we need to go to do portfolio loans. So you'll kind of get an idea of all that, but that's the process, and you would repeat that until you're done with your kind of Nomad acquisition model. Okay, so basically now we're going to do bookkeeping accounting for Nomads. And again, this is based largely on the presentation that Brian had put together. And I've been sick the last 4 or 5 days. I got a really bad cold. And so it is more so than usual, the content that Brian made in this presentation. So really, let's talk about some different options you have for financing. And actually, I'm going to pause the presentation for a minute because I'm not a fan of the animations. And so I'm going to try to take some of these out and remove them all. So let's see if we can kind of remove the animations here. Let's see, animations, none. There we go. Animations, none. I think we're gonna need to do these manually on each one. So basically, Brian, when he does his presentations, likes to slowly reveal content. I am not of the same mindset, so most of the time I just kind of remove those. And so I'll take them all out there, and we'll get right back to this. So, whoops. And then we're going to go over the actual spreadsheet that Brian has, and I will show you my web-based version of Brian's spreadsheet, so you guys will have access to all those things as well. And I'll give you that stuff here in a second. All right, getting back to the presentation now. All right, so the options for doing bookkeeping yourself, the easiest way, and what I actually personally prefer to do, is hire a bookkeeper and an accountant to handle everything. And that's my normal strategy. It's what I do. We have a CPA, and we just hand over, most of the stuff we have is actually partnerships, and so we hand over the partnership returns or the partnership numbers to the CPA. The CPA does everything for us. We used to have a bookkeeper. Turns out the bookkeeper was actually more expensive than the accountant doing the bookkeeping for us, so we actually got rid of the bookkeeper, and now our accountant actually does our books. I think Tammy does all this stuff, so basically I think she does it monthly, but I review it, as often as I can, quarterly at least, to kind of look at stuff. So that's one strategy for keeping track of all your investment stuff. The other thing, the do-it-yourself model, is QuickBooks. A lot of CPAs and accountants, they like QuickBooks. They use it with a lot of other businesses, and so they like the idea. They're familiar with it, and they'll recommend that you use QuickBooks if you're doing that. It is double entry accounting. Again, I'm not an accounting expert, but that apparently it kind of puts it into 2 different columns, your debits and your credits, so that both accounts balance. Again, I don't do that stuff, but basically that's the idea behind QuickBooks. It's one of the advantages. And most CPAs like when you use QuickBooks, but check with your CPA if you're going to have your CPA do it. There is a Quicken, which is different than QuickBooks. Quicken is kind of like the non-professional, money finance program. In fact, Microsoft Money and Quicken were the 2 kind of competing things. One was by Microsoft, the other one was by Intuit. And they would do personal finance. So you'd kind of put in your rental property or 2, or your regular portfolio, your stock account, your checking account, whatever it is in there. And so there was a Quicken version of that. And Quicken came out with an add-on for their software, which allows you to manage rental properties. It was sort of like some templates for managing rentals and how the income comes in. I've never personally used it, but apparently it's pretty popular, and some people still use it. If anyone who's on the call is actually using any of these, feel free to let me know. But basically, Quicken Rental Property Manager is another software package you can add on. So if you already use Quicken, you may want to go look at that and evaluate it and see if you want to do it. If you have a property manager, if they're managing a bunch of different properties, you may have seen some of these statements, because they actually are tools that professional property management companies use in order to send out their bookkeeping stuff. And Buildium is one of them, Appfolio and Propertyware. They're kind of different property management-based software applications that professional property managers use. And so you may receive statements if you have your property managed by somebody from them. And then Brian's tracking spreadsheet, which we're going to go give you a copy of tonight. I'll give you a link to download it. I'll show you exactly where that is. And then also, I have my own version of Brian's spreadsheet. So basically, Brian made this really cool spreadsheet. He's willing to share it with you guys. And then I took the same spreadsheet that Brian made and I built it right into the Nomad content on learntoberiich.com. And so I'll show you Brian's stuff and I'll show you my stuff side by side, and you can see they're basically identical. Just one of them is web-based and it kind of keeps all your stuff online, and the other one is Excel-based, and so you can go use Microsoft Excel to do your tracking. And then Brian says you can create your own like he did. So the other alternative, instead of going and buying QuickBooks or using the Quicken Rental Property Manager or kind of using the spreadsheet that Brian made, which is actually really cool, you could go and just kind of use your own Excel spreadsheet and kind of keep track of your finances that way. You know, Brian did an amazing job on his. If I were you, I probably wouldn't build your own. I'd just use his. And so you're welcome to do that. And whatever you decide to use, you know, we're not trying to persuade you to upgrade or pay or anything for access to any software. Really, if you're happy with whatever you're using to track your kind of financing, your income and expenses on your rental properties, great, keep it. There's no reason to switch. It is not a requirement. So one of the things we're doing in this class, it's not just tracking income and expenses, but part of it is, you know, how you keep track of all your receipts, how you keep track of all the files you have for your properties. And so part of what this presentation is about are the tools you need in order to get organized in your bookkeeping and accounting and organization of your rental property business, especially as nomads and as you ramp up. So one of the things we recommend you do, and I speak from experience here, you know, you do not want to store your important files, your real estate files, on a just local hard drive, because local hard drives fail. And you know, I've had stuff that I cannot replace stored on local hard drives where the hard drive has failed, and you know, the backups that I thought I had were not quite as complete as I thought they were, or they were corrupted, and I've had problems where we were not able to save stuff. So we have since started strongly recommending that you sign up for a service like Dropbox. And Dropbox is what we technically recommend, although there's other ones out there that are like Dropbox. I think Box.com is another one. Microsoft has one. I think it's called OneDrive. So you can use any of these other ones. Dropbox is what I personally use. Huge fan of it. And what Dropbox is, it's a subscription service. It costs you about you know, $99 for the year for a terabyte. There is a free plan where you can get 2 gigs, but if you're doing any type of serious real estate investing, your 2 gigs is going to go and get used up pretty quickly. So, you know, once you get beyond that, then you're going to need to upgrade to a paid plan, and they're about $100 per year. And there is an extra thing, which I'll talk about here. It's called the extended version history, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is an extra fee. And I think that's worthwhile too. So what is Dropbox? Dropbox is a service you subscribe to, you pay for it, and it allows you to run an application. It runs always in the background of your computer. And what it basically does is any files you save to your Dropbox folder, it's a folder on your computer, it makes one. Anything you save inside that folder, including file folder systems and files and whatever else, if you put it in there, it immediately, in the background, without you knowing about it, with your permission, uploads it to the cloud. And once it's stored in the cloud, then there's a backup for you. So if something happened to your local hard drive, you'd be able to access the files because you'd be able to go pull down that copy from the cloud and get access to it. The other nice thing about it is if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, there's a Dropbox app for that, and you can access any of the files that you put into your Dropbox folder and that got uploaded to the cloud. You can access any file you want on your phone, on your iPad, anywhere you want. The other thing that me and Tammy use, and I think other people use this too, is so Tammy and I share a Dropbox account. And so anything I save to my local computer here gets uploaded immediately to the cloud, and then instantly, basically, another copy gets downloaded to Tammy's computer in the same file structure on her hard drive. So now we have 2 copies on 2 local computers, one on mine, one on Tammy's, both in the Dropbox and the folder organization system that they have, plus an additional copy stored as a backup in the cloud. And not to get technical, but technically we have 3 different computers doing this. So it's my computer, another computer that Tammy works on, and then I have a third kind of like workstation computer, a backup computer in our basement that we have that's always on, that just gets a 3rd copy on a local hard drive. So we really have 4 different points where those files are stored. Now, is that a little bit overkill? Probably. And do you need to do that? No. You can just have your computer and then back it up to the cloud, and that's better than just not having a backup at all, and I strongly recommend you do that. But any of those files, so if Tammy's working on a file for a client or a rental property that we have, it'll go and it'll get stored there in a local drive on her computer, instantly get uploaded to Dropbox. Once it's in Dropbox, it comes down to my computer and the other computers, and it's accessible on our phones and our iPads and stuff like that. And it's all secure. It's all done through SSL, and it's really secure stuff. So and it can sync to multiple computers, which is what we talked about. You can also use this to sync with your bookkeeper or your CPA. You could share entire folders with your CPA in order to do that. If you've ever tried to email a really large folder, like let's say you have a whole bunch of PDFs for a closing, and the PDFs for some reason were really, really large, like they scanned them as images or something like that. You ever try to email those? Sometimes there's a 10 gig or 10 gig, 10 gigs, 10 gig limits. No, not 10 gigs. A 10 megabyte limit on files when you try to email them and stuff like that. You will not run into those problems with Dropbox because you can just mail the link to the Dropbox folder, and then when they click on the link, it'll show you all the files that they have in the folder, and they can download them all either with one click or they can download them individually, whatever they need. So you don't have to worry about email sizes anymore when you're doing those. So we talked about the price of the plans. It's 2 gigabytes for the free plan. You can go sign up there. There's a 1 terabyte plan, which is what I recommend. It's either $9.99 a month or $100 for the year, and I personally just paid $100 for the year. And then this extended version history thing. So this is actually really good. And Brian talks about this a lot, because he had an issue where this came up. So Dropbox automatically keeps a 30-day history of files. So if you basically you put a file into your Dropbox folder and it uploads to the cloud. If you accidentally went in there and you hit delete on the file, and the file got deleted from your local computer, just like it would if you were in any other folder, if you got deleted in there, you're like, oh my gosh, I deleted this file, I need to go get it. Well, Dropbox will save a copy of any file that was in your Dropbox folder for 30 days. But what happens if you happen to be doing something and you get kind of thick fingers and you accidentally delete something, but you don't realize you deleted something, and you go and you try to access that file a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later? Well, if you have the regular file version history, you can only go back 30 days. But if on day 31, if you actually try to access that file and you're 30 days beyond it, you're kind of past that extended version history thing, try to access it, it's not going to be there anymore. So Dropbox will not store it for you beyond that 30-day history. However, if you pay the extra fee, if you pay the $39 a year extra, then Dropbox actually saves each one of your files for a full year. And so I would strongly recommend that you pay for that extra thing, because if you find out you're trying to access a file, 30 days, 3 months, 60 days, 9 months later, and you're like, where's that file I had? Oh man, it was in this folder, it must have got deleted. You can go and look at your history on Dropbox and download a copy of that file or entire folder or whatever it is to do that. And so I strongly recommend you do it. Brian's story is, apparently Brian uses Microsoft Outlook for his email client, and there's one file that stores all of his old emails, and apparently he was making backups of that pretty regularly to his Dropbox folder, and everything looked good until he bought a brand new computer. And when he bought his brand new computer, he went and he deleted that folder, not realizing that he didn't have another updated copy of it. And then like 33 days or 35 days after he got this new computer and he had deleted this file, he had to go and try to access the backup because his file got corrupt or something like that. And so it turns out he was beyond the 30-day history and had all of these emails for decades worth of emails that he'd been saving up, important stuff that he really wanted to have in his email, and it wasn't there. And he was able to talk to support at Dropbox and get the file saved. They had a copy somewhere that they were able to go and download it, but I would not rely on that. And so now he pays for the $39 per year for the extra feature there. So I'd strongly recommend that. They do have a business feature. In my opinion, I don't think you should do it. In most cases, you're not going to need this unless you've got employees dealing with a lot of big files and stuff like that. I mean, even in my local business, we use Tammy and I use just the Plus model, which is the $99 a year. It's not $99 per person. It's just $99 for all of us to use. And so you can do that. But the business one is $12.50 per month per user, a minimum of 3 users, or advanced for $20 a month, which is probably overkill for most of what we're doing. And I would agree with that. So if anyone has any questions about the online storage stuff, I'd recommend just go ahead and drop it in chat or Q&A or something like that. But I'm just going to keep moving forward. So how do you set up your online folder structure? I will tell you that Brian teaches this class, and he has a slightly different version of this than what I recommend. And everyone's going to have their own variation on this, and so do whatever feels right to you. But here's what I recommend. It's a little bit different than what Brian does. So basically what I recommend you do is inside your Dropbox folder, you want to create a top level folder called, in this case, REI folders. It doesn't really matter what you call it. You can call it your Nomad folder, your real estate business folder, whatever it is. On my particular computer, it's actually a little bit different than what I'm even suggesting here, but this is a good organization method for people that don't have really crazy real estate holding stuff going on. So create a little folder called REI folders, and then underneath that folder, you want 2 folders, in my opinion. Number 1 is one for LLCs, is any of your entities that you're going to use for asset protection. And Brian is coming on and teaching asset protection for us, I think, in like a month or 2. So he's going to go into a lot of detail about how Nomad should use entities like LLCs and trusts in order to kind of do asset protection and protect their equity and their properties and things like that. So you're going to want a folder for your LLCs, and then in that same kind of level of folders, you're going to want a folder for your properties. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail on what you're going to have in your properties and what gets stored in each folder on the next slide. But realize that for those are the 2 top levels. So you have REI folders, and then you have an LLCs folder and a properties folder. And then in the LLCs ones, you're going to have all your different LLCs as their own separate folders. And then in the properties, you're going to have separate folders for all the different properties you have. So for each LLC, you're going to have your LLC by name. So if it's, the Main Street LLC, you'd have that in there, and then all the LLC related documents would be in that particular folder there. Inside the LLC folders though, and this is a little bit different than what Brian recommends, inside each LLC folder, I think you should make a cross-reference to the property that LLC owns. Because if you go in there and you're like, okay, what properties does Main Street LLC own versus the First Street LLC, and I'm confused about which one's in which, I say this, and you think to yourself, how hard is it to remember which properties in which LLC, James? You're just being crazy. Yeah, if you've got 1 or 2 properties, it's super, super easy. And I remember having this conversation with Brian early on. We're at the Boot Grill and talking about this stuff. And, he says to me, so, how many properties do you own? I was like, I don't even know, Brian. It's not like I'm keeping track and counting them and stuff. And he's like, how could you not know how many properties you own? And so I think Brian now understands what I mean when I just don't keep track to that level of detail. And the same thing goes true with LLCs and what they own and what's in them and stuff like that, because it just gets all fuzzy together. And I'm sure I could go sit down and recreate stuff if I really thought about it hard, but just like knowing off the top of my head, I just don't know. And so that happens with LLCs. You're like, what property is that LLC in? Or, who owns this particular property that I'm in? Is it this LLC, or is it this trust, or, how is it all set up? And so having this organized and cross-reference, I think actually will help you and save you time in the long run, especially when you're trying to save file folders and save files as they come in, be able to click on something and go immediately with a shared folder, like a link to the other folder, makes it a lot easier to do. So they're called folder shortcuts, and you should do those to go to the property itself. So that's what I recommend you do. So now we talked about this. Basically, this is the LLCs one. And then we're going to have all this stuff is basically the properties folders. So we have the LLCs and the properties folders. Now we're in properties. I want to show you what's inside each one of those. So underneath the properties, each property you have, I think you should have as an address. So 1234 Main Street. Now, if you're investing in different cities and your cities are, you have similar names in different cities, you may want to include city in the address there. But if you're doing everything in Northern Colorado and you're just kind of getting organized that way, as a shortcut, you do not need to use the city there. And so, especially because these addresses can get really long as they're all nested. It's in Dropbox, inside REI folders, inside properties, inside, archive, inside 1234 Main Street, Fort Collins, Colorado, 80525, inside, the purchase docs, and you have all these different sub things. Eventually you get too long where your actual folder path gets too long. And so one of the things we like to do is actually just abbreviate here and use 1234 Main Street to make it a more reasonable folder length structure, okay? And so I think there's all your property names, and then there's gonna be properties when you're considering buying stuff, you're going and you're analyzing a deal like, 1234 Main Street, you're considering buying it, and you're running your spreadsheet on it, and you're downloading some docs, and maybe even you made an offer on it, and the offer doesn't get accepted, or you go under contract and you terminate based on inspection, or you terminate based on loan, or something comes up where you don't buy it. I think you also need a folder for archive, because there are going to be properties like 1234 Main Street you may have made an offer on, and you didn't get that accepted, or you decided not to buy it, or you've sold it, where you want to move that to a folder that's outside your normal list of active stuff going on. And so I think at the same level as all the different property files, you have an archive folder up front, and then you take 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street. If you're not using it, you put it into archive and you store it there. So that's how I do it. Like, for example, for clients, if clients are trying to write offers, I do a similar thing. So if you're a client of mine, there's a client folder, and basically if you're writing an offer, it goes there. And then if you don't get that offer accepted, or maybe the offer's closed and we've closed that transaction, I will then move it into archive so that it's not active. I'm not trying to figure out, so which one are we working on with that person right now? And so that's one of the things we do as brokers as well. Okay, so then 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street, and inside 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street is this file folder structure that Brian actually put into his presentation here, and I agree with this structure pretty close. And I'll kind of use his because the differences I have are so minor that I don't think it's even worth differing from. The stuff that I've told you before, though, is a little bit different than what he recommends, and I do think that's worth changing. So here's what Brian does recommend. So he has a file, and he orders them by number so that they get listed by number importance rather than by alphabetical, because if you don't do the number in front, you know, the highest alphabetical one will be listed on top, and that's a little bit hard to organize. So he has purchase docs at the top as number 1. And so in there, you're going to have all the documents you have related to purchase, all your contract stuff, all your disclosures, all your addendums, you know, closing docs, I think is what he puts in there as well. So if you've got, you know, your stuff from closing and settlement statements and everything else that I would normally send you if I'm your broker with everything named correctly, just dump it right into purchase docs, and that's where you store it all. Then if later on you end up financing the property, again, you kind of do a cash out refinance or rate and term refinance, then you put all your refinance documents into section 1.1. So all the stuff related to your refinance goes into 1.1 there. So you have that there. If you end up, for asset protection reasons or for estate planning purposes, move your property into a trust, you'd actually put them into 2.0 trust docs. So all the things related to your trust go into 2 trust docs. Then anything for the property info, you know, old MLS sheets, photos from the previous MLS, photos that you're going to use in your advertising stuff, sample ads that you're using when you're running your property and you're doing your tenant screening and tenant marketing stuff. All that stuff goes into property info. Then anything related to your mortgage on the property, you put it into there. So if you've got a mortgage statement coming in, or your initial you know, mortgage escrow statements or whatever it is, you put all that stuff into 4 mortgage. Then anything related to taxes, property taxes that are coming into the thing, those go into 5. Anything on your insurance policy for the property, that would all go into 6. Anything related to the HOA would go into 7 for HOA. And then as you get expenses, if you put new carpet in on a property, or you pay an electric bill or anything like that related to expenses on the property, you would put that into folder 8. And you'd stay organized by putting everything into expenses in there, usually after you input it into the spreadsheet. We'll talk about that a lot later. And then number 9, tenant and property management info. And Brian uses this as a catch-all. So if he's managing the property himself, he put his tenants in there. If he has a property management company who's managing in there, he put all of the statements there, all the correspondence that they send over related to the management of the property in the property management info section there in section 9. Now, as far as naming files, and I know this seems a little bit crazy if you guys aren't, you know, as OCD as I am, but naming files is important. And I go a little bit to the extreme on this. Maybe it's my OCD-ness coming out, but I have a specific format that I use every time I name a file. And when they're not named that way, which is really rare at this point, drives me a little bit crazy. And so I'll go back through and rename everything to make sure that they're all named identically using this format. So the format I use is actually shown right here. It's basically the year as a 4-digit number, a dash, a month as 2 digits, a dash, days as 2 digits, space, dash, space, the property address, just the street address. So just 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street, not 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street, comma 4 Collins, comma Colorado, 80525. I don't put city, state, or zip code. It's only the street address, abbreviated for the postal abbreviation for the street kind of suffix, the street, avenue, court, whatever it is. So ST, CT, AVE, you know, whatever it is for the official postal abbreviation is what my standard is for doing that. And then a space, a dash, a space, and then whatever the description is of the document. And I have some pretty standard ones, like ones that occur all the time, like the HUD-1 or the settlement statement, or you know, a property management statement, or whatever it is. And so I'll put that in there, and then .pdf. So everything, whenever possible, is in PDF. Now, if I have to save it as an image, like let's say it's an image someone sent over of a screen capture of a text or something like that, then it is whatever it is. Like if it's a GIF or a JPEG or something like that, I would do that, or a .doc file if it's like an unusual editable file. It's not a not a PDF. So I'd go ahead and use the correct extension, but in most cases it's .pdf. And so I would go ahead and name those based on that. So almost all the files are scanned and saved as PDFs when you receive them. And then here's a really important note. Please don't wait until the end of the month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year in order to save all your files. It will become overwhelming. It's like email in some cases. If you don't stay on top of your email, at least for me, if I don't stay on top of my email becomes really overwhelming very quickly. I must receive, it's got to be close to 200 plus emails a day. And if I go and I wait 3 or 4 or 5 days or a week or a month or something like that to go process emails, I'd have to do like email bankruptcy and just abandon the account and start over again because it's way too hard to catch up on all that. But if as you get stuff and you're processing your mail each day and it comes into your hand, don't stick it into a pile of stuff to file. Actually process it if it's going to take you less than 2 minutes. This is like a David Allen getting things done philosophy, and that is if it's going to take you less than 2 minutes to process it, then you should do it now. You should not put it off and put it into a pile of, okay, I'll go process this stuff later. It is open it up, it's a bill, write the bill out, stick the thing, scan it in there, put it in a folder, update it in the Excel spreadsheet, and you're done. You're like completely in and out and get it done. That way you don't have this huge pile of things waiting for you to do and you get behind on that. So please do them as you receive them. It'll be much better for you, stay much better organized. Kind of a big, it's going to be a big time saver. And the other thing that happens, I don't know if this ever happened to you. I'm telling you all these stories. Like you guys are going to think I have this horrible memory. I really have a great memory. I try not to bog it down with like this like minutia stuff. But if you go, here's an example though. If you go and you have a file that's sitting on your desk and you end up finding it again at the end of the year when you're supposed to do your taxes, maybe it's a process at tax time folder, and you're looking at it and you're like, what is this? It's an expense for carpet, but what property was it? Where's the date on it? Sometimes they don't have dates on it. Sometimes you're like, I don't remember what this is even regarding. But if you, as soon as you got that, you actually filed it, you know exactly what property it was. You know exactly what date it happened. You know all the stuff you need in order to process it. If you end up doing it 6 months later or a year later, you could get confused. You're just like, I don't remember which property this was for. Where did we do a carpet on for? Was this my personal house? Was this a rental property? Which one was it? So don't wait until the end of the year. Definitely go and do those stuff. Okay. Online storage of all the things not Dropbox. So Brian got asked a question when he gave this presentation, I guess a year ago or so now, and there people were asking him, so I understand you save all your stuff like, the settlement statements and your statements from your property manager and, tenant stuff, the leases and all stuff. I get all that. So, but what about the stuff that's not easily saved? What about texts you get and emails you get from clients and any phone numbers or voicemail messages that could potentially become important? If a tenant calls up and they leave you a voicemail message and it's got some information on there that you want to make sure you save just to acknowledge that you received that, or maybe it's going to protect you in case they come back later and they say something that may not be true and you want to save all that. Where do you put all that stuff? And so Brian kind of broke it down into 3 different groups. Emails. You kind of broke it down into tenant communications, buying and selling information, so like emails between your title company, your realtor, your attorney, your CPA, things like that, and the HOA communications you have. And then for those, what he recommends you do is back them up regularly, and this is what he was doing with his Outlook file, and stores a copy in Dropbox. I don't actually use Outlook, and I don't have a .pst, which is the type of file you use in Outlook when you're saving all your personal stuff. Instead, I use a web-based email. And so I don't go and back up my email to a second source like Dropbox. Now, one could argue that I probably should, that I should go and maybe download a copy of all those emails, print them out as PDFs, and save them. And for especially important stuff, I do. But I actually use a different type of redundancy. I actually have all my emails stored in my Gmail account, and I pay extra for the Gmail stuff, by the way. I've gone well over the free Gmail limit a long time ago. And so I end up paying, I don't know what it is, $10 a month or something like that for a much larger storage space of stuff in my Gmail account. And as Brian will tell you, I do not delete emails. So if emails come in, I do not delete it. I archive everything. And so, Brian will occasionally call me up and say, hey, have you ever heard of so-and-so, or, has this guy ever emailed you? And I can literally go back and look through my emails and try to find out if this person emailed me a decade ago. So I don't delete emails at all, and I can go look back. I can go look at stuff. It's really uncommon for me to have to look at stuff, but I could if I needed to. And so the second source, though, is a copy of that email tends to get stored in my thing. And if I reply to the email, if it's important enough for me to reply to, a copy also gets stored in my CRM. So I have a separate software package I use in order to track my contacts and things like that. And then any email I send gets attached to the contact as part of their CRM record, my customer relationship management record. And so I have a copy stored on my CRM and in my email. And so I do have some redundancy to just my Gmail, but I think Gmail is enough. If you're using Outlook, though, I think that you should save it elsewhere because it's not being saved to the cloud. You don't have a company like Google that's saving all of your emails and kind of keeping them all aligned securely. You need to have a second source. And so Brian is right. If you're using Outlook, you want to back up all your emails, that PST file or whatever the equivalent is for you, whatever email program you're using, and store that on Dropbox. Now, I don't think Brian, and you can correct me if he listens to this later if I'm wrong, but I don't think Brian is going through and saying, okay, show me all the emails from Joe Smith, my tenant, and then exporting those as separate files to Dropbox. I think he's storing his entire .pst file is kind of personal email file folder for all of his email at one time. And so he's doing that like once a week or once a month or whatever his cycle is for doing that manually and storing it there to kind of keep that. Now, if he has a particular email that he wants to save, I know that he would go ahead and print out a PDF of that and put it into that tenant file folder system there, but he's not doing it as a matter of course and going through all the different tenants and saving them that way. And I don't recommend you do that either. All right, so similar idea occurs with text. So they're kept on the phone, so there's a copy on the phone as well. They get backed up regularly. If you're using the iPhone, you can do an iPhone backup, and they're kind of done through the Apple backup there, and they're stored on there. If you think that you're concerned about a particular text, what I would do is actually screen capture the text, save that image to the tenant file folder, and do that. And so what I do is I would go ahead and email it to myself. Then when I got back to my home office, I would actually save a copy of it to Dropbox in the folder for the tenant, and I'd archive the email so that I had a copy both on my phone, which is probably the one that's most likely to get deleted, the one that's on my email, which is not going to get deleted, and an additional one in Dropbox in that tenant's file folder if I need to store something that I think is sensitive, like a tenant telling me, I understand that my rent was late, and I'm not gonna get another kind of reprieve on the next one or something like that, or I acknowledge I did damage to that, or send me a bill or whatever it is. Save copies of stuff like that. And Bryce says, some is super important. You may want to take a screenshot text and store it in Dropbox in the property file under the tenant's file folder. Okay, so as far as phone numbers, Brian uses an iPhone, I use an iPhone, and Brian has a really good tip in here, and it's not something I've done, but I definitely like it, and I would use it in the future. So when Brian actually puts his tenants in his phone, instead of actually putting the company that they work for, which is what I've been doing, like kind of a silly goose instead of doing it the way that he recommends, but basically instead of putting the company name in the phone, when the tenant calls, he basically stores their number and he puts the address of the property that they're renting as the company name. And so whenever they call, it'll say, John Smith, and it'll have 1234 Main Street as the company name right underneath their name. And so oh, this is the tenant for my property on Main Street, and you can quickly and easily know exactly why they're calling and who it is. So you'll know the property address as well when they call in there. So that's a nice little tip that Brian suggests there, and I think that's a good idea. Any questions on online storage of all the stuff that's not specifically Dropbox files sort of things? Any questions on this? Got a really quiet group tonight. I'm assuming chat works, that you guys can hear me. You're still on the call, so I assume that it all works. I don't think I've had a single person chat with me tonight, so I'm feeling lonely. I'm really not feeling lonely, but you guys are welcome to chat if you want. All right, so physical storage. So here's another place where Brian and I diverge. There used to be a time, and I actually, really early on in our relationship, I showed Brian a photo of my physical file system for all the rental properties, and it was organized, but it looks really chaotic because there's all sorts of file folders that are really thick that have a bunch of stuff from when we did rehab on the property, and another one that has just all the mortgage statements, and the tabs are kind of all aligned because I didn't do the left, right, middle tab thing. I did my own kind of sorted system with a hang green file folder and everything else. And so I took a photo of it and I sent it over to Brian, and he was like laughing at me. But I don't think that you need, for the most part, a physical file system. And he makes a good case about a couple documents that you may want to keep originals are, but I'm not sure that you need an entire filing cabinet for those. I think you can get by because you're probably going to need a safe Anyway, so you probably need to put some of these things like your note deed of trust or whatever it is inside the safe itself. Everything else you do electronically. Yeah, Claudia says, funny because you are the OCD one. That's true. So yeah, someone chatted with me too. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I don't think you need the physical file folder system. Oh, I know why you said that, because of my messy file folder. Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you a side story. It's absolutely true. I'm OCD. But there's a weird thing that I do, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not logical in any way, which is really weird for me too. But I only organize things alphabetically by the first letter. So if you go in my filing cabinets now, which I've got, you can see it behind me. I got filing cabinets. We don't keep anything current in there. There's some stuff that's in there, but it's not like where we put all of our new stuff. But I only alphabetize by the first letter. So all the A stuff, it's not A, whatever the next letter is for alphabetical order. If it starts with A, it goes in A. And so I have to look through, 4, 5, or 6 or 7 files in order to find whatever's in A, but I don't organize by the second letter. So that's a little weird thing that's about me that no one would have guessed. All right, so getting back to the physical file system though. So Brian seems to think that you should have a physical file folder system, and you should store some of your original docs, no deed of trust, lease, etc., in those things. I don't think you need it. Our entire brokerage business is without physical files. So all the brokerage stuff we have doesn't get stored in any of these files, and I have files downstairs, stuff that's old. And I have it all just so, because I'm paranoid that someone's going to come for tax reasons and do it, and it's not all digital there. So I keep it all, but at the same time, I'm not putting new stuff in there. I will not need a new file system. I've got this one. I've got 2 drawers here. I've got another legal file folder system on the other side of the camera, which you guys can't see. So I've got these all things, but I don't put stuff in them. In fact, I haven't been the legal one in years. I don't put anything in there. It's just not something I'm actively using. So I don't think you need the physical one. Everything we do is digital. You think you can store almost everything digital. If you're in the business of lending money and you need to have the note and deed of trust, the originals, to be able to give back to the borrower or something like that, sure, you're gonna need a little file to kind of keep track of that stuff. But I don't think that you need one for doing all the Nomad stuff. I will share with you what Brian does use for his physical file system. It's a little bit simpler than what I've done in the past, but I think it works. And so he says each property, he says, get a legal size 3-drawer filing system. And the reason he says legal is because some of these documents come in legal form. And if you don't do the legal one, you end up having documents that are the wrong size. So you might just as well get the legal size to begin with. It's not all of them come in legal, but enough of them come in legal that's a pain in the butt unless you have it all legal. So get a legal size 3-drawer filing cabinet. Then each property gets 3 to 4 folders. He uses a left tab one or two in the middle tab ones, and then one on the right. And they're like the manila file folders. I don't know if you can see them. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? So like one of these, and they've got like a little thing on the left there. So basically he says have one on the left, 1 or 2 in the middle, and then one all the way on the right. And the left one, he wants you to put the property address and then the purchase docs. And if you guys haven't read the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen, David Allen goes through a really good process for organizing physical file folder systems. And you should get like a little, it's like a thing for making the labels, like a label maker thing. I've got mine over at the thing. I'm not going to run and grab it right now. But I think that's actually good for getting organized and keeping them all organized that way. So he says, 1, 2, 3 purchase docs, all purchase docs, the note, deed of trust, settlement statement, TD 1000, the deed, etc. That all goes into the one with the left tab. Then the 2 middle tab ones, the property address mortgage, and then the property address expenses. And where he says 1 or 2 here is if you're doing all your expenses digitally, you do not need the physical file folder. But if you're going to do them, if you're not going to do them digitally, then you should have a physical one for expenses. So anything dealing with the mortgage, loan, transfer, servicing, anything like that goes in the mortgage one. All of your expenses or invoices for the property goes into the expenses one. So my system before, I would break this all down by year. And so I would have an initial purchase package. If I did any refinance, it would be a refinance folder. So that all stuff would go in there. And then each year I'd have a expenses 2017, mortgage statements 2017, or whatever it is. And so I'd have folders for each year, and I'd keep them all organized that way. That's one of the reasons why it was sort of out of hand and got all messy. So it had all that stuff in there. And then the last one for Brian, the right tab, property address, tenant names, stuff like that is your reservation deposit, the lease, the late utility notices, etc. If it's multifamily, you'll have multiple folders for tenants to kind of break that out and get organized there. And then as tenants move out, he moves the tenant folders to an archive location. So you might have like a folder behind this property that says, you know, past tenants or archive tenants or something like that to stay organized in that way. Separate folders for each LLC as well, operating agreements, stuff like that. And as you know, I recommend you do all this stuff digitally. So really, once you scan it, you're good. You don't need to have the originals for most of this stuff. The exception I can think of where you might want to have the original is notes and deeds of trust. All right, buying your property documents. So in my opinion, and Brian recommends this as well, save all of the emails related to the purchase until it's over. I actually recommend you just keep them forever. I don't delete emails, so I think it's easy. Storage is relatively cheap. Just kind of keep all that stuff forever. Save out, anytime you get a file attachment, make sure you save a copy of it to your folder and use that naming convention we talked about, the year, month, day, dash, you know, the property address is just a street address, and then whatever the description of the property name is .pdf. Save those to the file folder for the actual purchase and do that there. Scan and name any and all documents as you get them. So if you're working with me, I provide you all the stuff named correctly at the very end, but you're welcome to, you know, ask me for stuff as we go. But any of the contracts, the amend extends, preliminary title commitments, inspection reports, expenses, and the earnest money you put out, all that stuff, you should save copies of that in your file folder. And it'd probably be in that purchase document, that 1 point, whatever it is, purchase info that he kind of uses in this file folder system. Digitally file in appropriate folders. For any income expenses, you want to put those into your tracking spreadsheet as soon as possible. You don't want to have to go through after your purchase and say, okay, I spent this on a inspection, I spent this on radon, I spent this on, you know, doing some, you know, screening or whatever it is that you pay earnest money or things like that. You want to go ahead and put your income and expenses into the tracking spreadsheet as you go. And of course, if you don't buy the property, you can go back through and delete all the stuff that you entered in that's related to that property. So it's easy enough to fix. Brian recommends saving photos from the listing and the listing itself. That's part of our process when we actually buy a property. We save a copy of the listing so that we can see how it was described to make sure that it doesn't miraculously change when you're under contract. Hasn't technically happened to us yet, but I could see situations where a seller decides they don't like that they said that something about the property and they change their mind for maybe legal reasons. They shouldn't have said something they said. And then, you know, while you're under contract, the description of the property changes. They don't keep track of the history of descriptions in our MLS. You may have to maybe be able to go and ask them to see if there was an older version. I've never had to do this, but it's so much easier if you just print out a copy as PDF of the property, the MLS sheet itself. And so if you ever buy a property with me, when you go and you sign your offer, you'll notice we include a copy of the MLS sheet on there. That's one of the reasons we do that. We don't save copies of photos of the property, although I guess you could. Probably for similar reasons, you'd say, you know, this was included in the photos. Although the contract really rules as to whether something's included or not, so not sure that photos would help you. I guess they probably could. You can go do that if you really are paranoid about it. You know, go on the listing website and download the photos to your folder while you're under contract to buy a property. Then get digital copies at closing. So when you go to closing and you're buying a property, a lot of times they're going to hand you this really thick envelope. I don't have any because we don't get them, but they hand you this really thick envelope with a copy of almost everything you signed, and they say, here you go, here's your property folder. You're going to need this for when you go meet with your accountant to do taxes at the end of the year. And they're right, you will need it. But you could instead, or at the same time, say, I would like digital copies of this whole thing. And the title company, instead of handing you a huge stack of paper, can actually say, I've emailed you a link to download all of these digital files that I just would have given you in your hand. And you can choose whether to get both the physical ones and digital or just digital. So when I go there, you'll hear me, if we're at closing together, I'll say, did Tammy tell you, you know, we only need a digital copy of the file? Because some brokerages want physical ones. And Tammy usually is the one that reminds the title company that we only need the digital copy for them. So get a digital copy of all your stuff at closing so that you have it. Now, as far as getting copies from me, if you're working with me and I'm your broker doing stuff, I will give you a copy of all the stuff related to your contract, related to the purchase up to closing. Certain documents the title company does not want to provide to me, especially some of your loan documents and things like that, your tax returns. I don't have any business holding on to your tax returns. There's nothing to do with them. So I don't need to get copies of them, and sometimes they won't send me copies. But if anything is sent to me from the title company, I will download it, I'll save it, I'll name it correctly so it's got the right file format. And at the end of closing, you can say to me, hey, James, could you send me over all the files we have for this particular purchase? And I will be happy to share with you the entire file folder. You can just grab them all. They'll all be organized and named correctly. and done all prettied up for you so that you can just go ahead and do them. Some of the documents you would have received, I might not receive the same ones because you'll get a couple extra that are from me. Occasionally, I'll get a document or two that I probably shouldn't even have, like the seller settlement statement. Occasionally, they'll accidentally send me over those, but they may not have given it to you. But you might see that, but it's really uncommon and not something you should kind of hold your breath that you're going to get a copy of. So if you need copies, though, you can ask me after closing, and I will do that. So here's an example of Brian showing you, what one of his purchase docs folders looks like, and he has whited out the property address name, but right here it would be like 1234 Main Street, and then he shows you contract to buy and sell, counter proposal removing survey, mold disclosure, and so this is how primarily we are naming all these file folders and then sending them over to Brian at the end of closing, or Brian is using the same naming convention and doing it. So he has either adopted ours or I've adopted, or he basically got it from us and just kept the names. Excuse me. All right, cool. So that's what the naming conventions look like there. So managing a property, here are the documents related to that. Tenant communications saved in the email folder or text on phone and then back up regularly. Brian uses folder filing systems on his computer, at least I think he does, where if he gets an email from a tenant, he drags it over to either the property address or whatever he does there. I don't do any of that stuff. I archive everything, and I use Google search feature. So I use Gmail, he uses Outlook. I use Google search feature just to search for the name or the property address or whatever it is. So I don't do any type of organization of folders. I only archive it and then I go back and search. So whatever way you prefer, if you're using Gmail, just use search. If you're using Outlook, you may want to kind of drag it to folders to stay organized. I will tell you, if you're using Gmail and you're not archiving stuff, though, it's a nightmare to try to find everything in your inbox and stay organized. You should really start archiving things as you process your email. And then back up regularly. Each month, enter all recurring items. So typically, if you're doing your expenses stuff, rent, mortgage, maybe HOA, and utilities into your expense thing. We'll talk about that a little bit here. And then for other income expenses as they occur, like maintenance or supplies or things like that, enter in the spreadsheet or on the website, which is the James Orr version of Brian's spreadsheet. And then download or scan, save as a PDF so that you have copies of your expenses on that spreadsheet, and file digitally and physically if needed for all doing that. And then on tenant turnover, save all the pictures and video for the move-in, move-out documents. Remember we talked about tenant screening and how when we do the turnover, we're going in there and having them do a move-in and move-out inspection report where they acknowledge the condition of the property or mark anything that they don't agree with. And as you go walk through, you're taking photos before you give the property to them and videoing it, and make sure you document the conditions so that they can't say later on, oh, this was here before I moved in. You can say, no, these are the photos from when we walked through, and I took photos of it. As you can see in this photo, that damage was not there. Okay, that meth lab in the bathroom, that did not exist when you moved in. I can assure you. Here are the photos of the bathroom. Okay. So save the application, the credit report, the new lease docs, and the move-in inspection. Save them all in the tenant file folder on your computer there. All right, so an example. Brian checked his mail, had a utility late payment notice from a tenant, and an HOA bill. He scanned both of them in, named them, in this case 2016-11-9-1234 Main Street, Old Town HOA.pdf, put that into the folder for the HOA for that particular property. 2016-11-9-5678 3rd Street, Joe Smith, delinquent utility notice.pdf, put that into the tenant correspondence for that thing, paid the HOA by check, entered it in the check ledger, entered the information for the HOA payment into the spreadsheet, which we're going to get to here in a second, and then he filed both physically and digitally. I think you only need to do digital, and then you can shred the physical, and then that's it. That's the organizational process, and that's what you should be doing as you receive mail every day, every other day, whatever your process for doing mail. Don't wait till the end of the year to do this stuff, okay? Make sure you process it as you get it. It's so much easier to stay on top of. It's overwhelming if you don't. All right, then when selling a property here, the documents get digital copies at closing. We talked about that in detail. Or if you're not willing to ask them for a digital copy, or ask me and I'll ask them to give you a digital copy. If you're not willing to do that, you got to scan them all in yourself. It is a pain in the butt to scan all these documents one by one. In fact, it'd be easier for you if you actually missed the opportunity to do digital file and you didn't get them to do it. It would be easier for you to say, James, could you please call down to the title company? Let's go down there. I'll give them the stack that they gave me back, and then they can scan all of them in as one big PDF. And then all you have to do is like print out 2 pages to a separate PDF rather than trying to scan them all in yourself. Okay. So if you ever need to do that, just let me know. We'll go back to the title company. We'll say, hey, listen, we really wanted a digital copy of this. Can you please scan it all as one big PDF and send it to us? It's easier to do it that way than do like manual scanning, in my opinion. File any other last items as they come in from the property. You're going to get like a whole bunch of stuff last minute. It's the nature of our business that things come in sometimes after closing. After that year's taxes are done, move property digital folder to an archive folder. We've talked about that use of the archive folder, and then archive the physical folder as well if you're doing that. So the walkthrough, discuss entering. Okay, so this is basically once you walk through spreadsheets. So let's take a look at spreadsheet. Let's see here, spreadsheets. Okay, everyone see that spreadsheet? I think it's not showing you just PowerPoint, so if you guys can see that, let me know. Okay. Someone let me know. So really, the spreadsheet, I'll start doing it. If you guys can't see the spreadsheet, definitely let me know though. So if you haven't seen Excel before, you can zoom in and out as to what your spreadsheet is using this little thing all the way here on the bottom right. Yeah, Donna says you can see it fine. That's good. So basically, if you're over here, you can zoom in and zoom out. Brian's spreadsheet has a bunch of different reports going across on the main tab. So here's different tabs. There's a tab for property report. There's a tab for entering income. There's a tab for entering expenses. And then there's a tab for the drop-down list. And I'll kind of go over what each of these are for. But let's start off with property lists. And if you want to see like the whole thing, you can zoom out. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, especially since it's hard to read with the presentation. And so I'll kind of zoom in here and you can kind of see that. For now, though, let's go look at the drop-down list. So the drop-down list, here you basically list out the different categories you have for income. And then these will show up as an option when you're in the income field entering things in there. So it'll say income category, and when you enter it in, it has a drop-down option. This list comes from this tab. So anything you list down here, if you added a new one here, it would actually update on that list. So when you enter it, it would give you the option to pick it from a drop-down. I would recommend, unless you have a really good reason for changing these income categories, just leave them alone because they tend to be set up for very specific reasons. So when we run reports, you can see a report of the income you have for the property and where they're coming from. And then expenses specifically are set up so that they match what you need for your tax return. So if you're like, hey, listen, I really want to break supplies down into hard supplies and soft supplies, don't. Really just use what we have here for the expense categories list because that's what your CPA or accountant is going to need for entering that in when you do your taxes. So don't mess with it unless you know what you're doing and you want to do it. Donna says, who's the Excel guru? So Brian actually made this spreadsheet, and I listened to part of the presentation he did last time he did it. He said, this is taking me 2 years to make. And I started laughing. I'm like, Brian, it didn't take you 2 years to make the spreadsheet. He's like, well, it was like 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there over a 2-year period. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense because this isn't it's a really cool spreadsheet, but it's not a 2-year work of kind of Excel stuff. So anyway, he did a really amazing job kind of doing this. And I'll walk you through it. You guys will have the ability to download this. I'll give you the link here in a second. I'll show you exactly how to download it. If for some reason I forget, please do remind me because I think it's in here, but I don't remember if I put the link in the presentation itself. But I will show you exactly where to get it. It's free for everybody. So basically, it's free because Brian did it, and I might have to bribe him a little bit with some dinner and stuff like that. But he's voluntarily giving it to you guys, so you guys can use it. All right, so here's where it is. Income categories, this is where they are for the drop-down menu. Here's all the expense categories. These are where they would be for drop-down menu. And then here's something you will want to modify. So pay attention for this one. Here's your property list, and you could do LLCs and stuff here. So let's say I wanted to go see, 1234 Main Street. If my property was, 6, 7, 8 John Street, I could put that in there, and now that would appear up as a property in my drop-down list as to which ones I'm entering. It'll appear on the reports that I can actually run reports on that particular property. So you'd want to go put in whatever properties you had on here, and if you were about to buy a new one, you'd add it in here. So 999, 12th Street or something like that. 12th Street. That's my cold. I told you it's been gnarly for like a week. All right, so you do that, and then you go enter in the rest of the stuff for it. So city for this is going to be Fort Collins, Colorado, 80525. Whoops. If you've got a mailbox, what mailbox it's going to, it's like a little thing for him. The purchase date for this, the purchase price, current value. So you can put some additional information just for you to track it. You don't need to enter all that information. You could just track expenses right from here. Okay, so you don't need to go crazy and do that. But you add whatever property is there. And then as you get your bills in, which we talked about, he lets enter an income. So let's say you went on here and you had new rental income. So the address, the date, date rather. So today, what is today? 8/22. So 8/22, 2017. Just enter in the date. What property? Let's do it for the new property we were just about to buy, 999 12th Street. So it appears in that new drop-down menu. You just kind of pick whatever property it belongs to. If you had it for a different property, just pick that one, 678 John Street or 5678 3rd Street or whatever it is. Put it there, and then what was the expense? This is the drop-down category for all of your income. So in this case, let's say it was rent, and then description, we're going to call it rent for, this is going to be September. Okay, so rent for September, you just put down rent there, and then the amount. So in this case, let's say it was $1,500. That's it. So you've now entered in the rent for that particular property. If you got like a pet fee or application fee or whatever it is, same type of idea. Just put in the address, or put in the date rather, 8/22/2017. Whatever property it was, select it from the drop-down menu. So 678 John Street, and let's say in this case it was going to be utility bill back. So you got some income they were going to pay you for utility bill back, and then call this sewer. And then you put in, you got $147 for that. That's it. It keeps track of all your different expenses on there, okay? So that's how you enter in an income. Now, if you have expense, same type of idea. Enter in the date, enter in the property, select it from the drop-down menu for whatever property it is. If you guys see that, is it too small? If it's too small, let me know. But I could zoom in here a little bit, right? So basically, you got your thing here, and then you do your property address, whatever it is. Pick the property, and then pick down what the expense category was. Mortgage payment, advertising, cleaning, insurance, legal fees, whatever it is that you had on there. Just go ahead and enter that in there, and then you can do a description. Mileage for whoever it was, or interest-only loan, or whatever it was, and then the dollar amount. And then once you enter it in there, it's entered as an expense. Okay. Then when you go to the property report, it's going to show you your report for the property. So Brian had some data that he kind of pre-populated here, so you can see how it all works. But from the top list, you basically select which property you want to see a report on. So let's say we want to see a report on 12th Street, and this is 2017 year. So 12th Street in August, we had a $1,500 rent come in. It just automatically creates the report, shows you, where the income source was, what percentage of your income that was, and then the total amount for that, and then broken out by month so that you can see where it was. Okay, so super easy for you to see your expenses on there. I'm going to go back and do 2016 to see the report for some stuff you had entered in here. And then let's go look at, John Street. Oops. John Street. Okay, so for John Street, I guess we didn't have any income for there. 3rd Street. Okay, there we go. So we have some stuff written down there for 3rd Street. So basically, you have all the stuff in here. Shows you the kind of totals you have there, and you can see all the different income and expenses, and then the summary for. Whoops. Expand. Trying to make this thing a little wider. It's not want to make it wider. All right. Well, so you can see the number. You have to go look at the number there. I guess you have to adjust the width. So Brian has this spreadsheet locked down so that you don't screw stuff up automatically, but you can go ahead and make stuff wider. You just have to adjust it somehow in here or something. Okay. It shows you the numbers here, or maybe I'll zoom out. There you go. When you zoom out, it makes it easier to see. So you see the numbers. So basically, once you do that, though, you pick whatever property you want, whatever year you want. It'll run the kind of numbers for that whole year. And then over here is an itemized income and expense summary for this particular property. So this is doing 5678 3rd Street for the 2016 year. It shows you all of the income stuff you've got coming in for that period for that property, and then all the expense stuff you've got coming in for the year and for that property. And then I think maybe it doesn't do a summary at the bottom. So this just tells you what that is for there. Then over here, it gives you a summary for the property and kind of gives you a quick recap of what happened for the income, the expense, the profit, the monthly profit percentage, cash on cash profit, monthly profit, cash on cash, whatever it is there, and shows you all those numbers with some summaries for all the properties you have. So you can see that. And then finally, itemized income and expense by category. So this is what you may want to send over to your accountant or CPA, because this is what they're going to need to do your taxes. So you basically, these match up, the expense categories match up with your actual tax return. It's what they ask for, and that's why we're using these ones. And so it'll show the summary of what you need for each property, and then the income for all that stuff is on there too. And then itemized income and expense by category. What is the difference between these two? Income. Oh, all properties. So this one is just the one. This is a summary for all the properties. So you can kind of see there. Okay, so that's basically an overview of Brian's spreadsheet. Super easy to use. You go in there, you enter in your income here, you enter in any expenses you have here. You can adjust which properties you own here. If you need to modify the income and expense categories, you can, don't need to. And then the property reports for doing different properties, and then pick a different property and it'll show you the numbers for those there. Oops. So you can just see different numbers for different properties. So he wanted me to cover on this entering income and expenses. We talked about that. Discuss the drop-down menus, and then they match the tax forms. We talked about that. Discuss tracking of properties and drop-down sheet. So we talked about that, where you can add your different properties here. Mention year, days, in February. So Brian actually, when he did his spreadsheet originally, it's pretty complicated formula stuff Brian did. He did a really nice job. But he had, at one point, in order to make the math work right, he had to determine how many days were in February, because if you have a leap year, there's an extra day in there, and so it messes some calculations up if you don't actually know the number of days in February when you do your spreadsheet there. And so he had a field in here. I make fun of him all the time. It's really funny. So he had this field in here for being able to determine how many days were in February for that year, so it did the calculations correctly. I think he's since done it so that it works out correctly. Let's see here. Yeah, see, he does it so that it works out correctly, but it basically he used to have to manually put in the number of things in February, and he left that in his presentation, so you don't need to do that anymore. And then walk through the property report sheet. We walk through those reports. Use the monthly view to catch mistakes. So let's see what he was talking about there. So the monthly view to catch mistakes. Oh, so you can go look down here and see the different items you have on there and whether or not you have expenses. So that's just sort of a way to catch mistakes if you're looking at those. And then discuss total investment column on drop-down lists. So you can do total investment. This will then be used to determine your cash-on-cash return. So this is going to be your denominator when you figure out the cash-on-cash return on some of these calculations over here. So like when he says here COC, he's using your cash-on-cash return. He's using your amount you invested to figure out what the calculation is. So that's where he's using that number. So if you don't have one in there, like this 12th Street one, I didn't put one in, so it's division by 0. That's why there's a problem. If I put one in there, like over here, cash-on-cash return, call it 100,000. So now when I go back to this report, now it doesn't have division by 0 anymore. Now it's showing me cash-on-cash returns. Okay, so that's what you do there for that. And then let me show you the web-based version. So this was the version Brian made that shows you a quick little summary on how to do this. And then I will show you the web-based version of this. Let's see here. Oops. If I can find it. Here we go. Okay. Before I do that, let me go and show you guys where to go download the spreadsheet that I just showed you. So if you go to learntoberich.com/bookkeeping-spreadsheet, the address is right up here, bookkeeping-spreadsheet. I'll post it into the chat window there so you guys can see that. If you go to that page, though, it pulls up this page on the website. And it basically talks about, Brian was really nice to give us a spreadsheet, gives you a couple views of different things he's got in there, walks you through what rental income, rental expenses are, the item report things. And then you have to be logged in. Logging in is free. You just need to create an account. And then you can click downloading Brian's bookkeeping accounting spreadsheet. When you click on that, it'll ask you where you want to save it, and just save a copy of it to your desktop. And then you'll have a copy that you can use. And actually save a copy in your Dropbox folder. That way you have backups of it. Okay, so that's where it is. And then I want to show you that I have a web-based version of the same thing. So if you are in your, and this is for premium nomads only, it's not free to everybody. So learntoberich.com/houses. You go here, you enter in your houses, what you have there, and I'll show you a sample one. I think it's this Main Street one that I put some data in. But if you go to bookkeeping here for that, very similar to Brian's thing, it gives you a little summary of what your income and expenses are. And then you enter income. And you go here, it asks you for the date that you're doing it, what the categories are, and you'll notice these categories are very similar because I basically copied Brian's spreadsheet with this permission. And so basically, you'll have whatever it is in your non-refundable pet deposit, enter in your dollar amount, $120, and then you can put a note in here, August 2017, good stuff, okay? And then you hit save. It will actually add that as a record to your thing here. So August 2017, good stuff. It shows you that that's there. It's $120. If you make a mistake, you need to delete it. You can delete it here. But otherwise, it's going to show you yearly reports. Well, actually, the journal will show you the list of all the different ones. That's just what we're just looking at. But you can do yearly reports and see, just like Brian's had on there, here are all the different income categories. Here's the total of the income. Here's all the expense categories. And then the net, subtracting the income from the expenses, or subtracting the expenses from the income. You can see what the net was for that thing. And so it just shows you what all your expenses were on there. And so you can just quickly see what they were. And then also, if you want to enter expenses, same idea, except the drop down now just shows you the expense stuff on here, and you put the dollar amounts in there and any memos you have about transaction. So you can choose to use Brian's spreadsheet. Totally acceptable, works great, really easy for you to use. Or if you're more of a web-based person, you're welcome to use the web-based version of this as well, and keep track of those. All right, so let's see, getting back to this. So that's where this goes to. It just shows you the different stuff in there. Partnership versus personal return form 8825 versus Schedule E. So this is where he wanted me to show you where he gets the categories from. So here are the expenses, and these match: advertising, auto, travel, cleaning, maintenance, commissions, insurance, interest, repairs, tax, utilities, whatever it is, versus the expenses for the Schedule E, which is the personal tax return one, I think. It shows you all the similar list of different expenses from your tax return. So it just shows you that he listed those out for a reason, so that it makes it easier for you. So it's tax time. What do you do? What was the web page of Brian's spreadsheet to download? I just posted it in the chat window. I'll try to post it here as well, Scott, for you. But it's in the chat window too. But I think that's it. So let me know if you got that, and if you didn't, definitely let me know. Or drop me an email afterward. But it's basically learntobirich.com/bookkeeping-spreadsheet. And that should be right on there. Okay, perfect. So it's tax time. What do you do? Make sure the spreadsheet is up to date. So go look through it. See if you're missing anything. Like if you know you're getting rent for 12 months, go quickly look through the spreadsheet and see if you have rent coming in for 12 months. See if you paid a mortgage for 12 months. See if you paid your taxes and your insurance or whatever it is that you have that you're expecting stuff to come in, and just do like a really quick, simple check to make sure you're not missing something major. So go ahead and do that. Use a spreadsheet and then compile info for each property. Also do it for the top level LLCs. So if you noticed on there, there was a spot for you to enter in property addresses, but you could just as easily put in an LLC name and then track the expenses you have for an LLC. And Brian had a sample one in there. So it's not like it automatically sums it up, but if you have an expense that's an expense of the LLC, like your registration stuff, or you paid an attorney, or whatever it was work for an LLC, not to a specific property, you can keep track of any income you have coming into the LLC, that's not related to a particular property, or any expenses you have related to it that's not related to a particular property, and track that as well. So it's pretty flexible in that way. Mortgage only interest is an expense, so you can go look at that. It's different from the spreadsheet. Capital improvements, call out what the spend is for and which unit. So if you're putting new carpets, new kitchens or stuff in there, go ahead and do that. And the CPA will depreciate across whatever number of years, depending on the expense and what's allowed. And so I think he's got a slide coming up here shortly where he talks about how a particular one was depreciated over a certain period of time. But if you're doing your own taxes, make sure you know that. If you're not, like I'm not doing it, just send it over to your CPA and they will figure it all out for you. Mileage in 2017 is 53.5 cents per mile, so you can track your mileage in here and be able to track that. If it's a partnership, pay this out prior to the end of the year so that people aren't trying to amend their tax returns. It's actually one of the big frustrations for me is when partners take their time doing tax returns and stuff like that, and I want to file my taxes in January or February or whenever it is because I'm on top of my stuff and the CPA wants to get it done, and she's been doing all the stuff all year long and she knows kind of where it is. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in like really late April or mid-April, we get a final thing from a partnership that I've forgotten about or something like that. So, gotta be careful. If partnership pay this out prior to the end of the year, if not, list as mileage. Give everything to your CPA, and they will do the rest of it from there. So here's an example of the summary thing that Brian would send over to the CPA and be able to just say, here it is. This is everything you need, and these are the categories you need, and with the totals, because I've been categorizing as I go, and this is what you're going to need to enter into my tax return. So here's an example of depreciation. He paid $2,202 for new carpet, and 50% of it was taken immediately. So he's going to depreciate $1,101 over a 5-year period. I don't know what the HY is, and I don't know what the 200 dB is, but it basically says 220 is the depreciation amount, and that comes out as a benefit in your tax return. So basically that's an example of that on the form. The documents to give to your CPA in addition to your personal return. So all settlement or HUD-1 statements from that year. So you'll get that at closing. The end of year mortgage statements. You'll get a copy of that from your mortgage company showing you how much interest you paid on that particular property. All 1098s received. I'm not sure what that is, but 1098s, if you receive them in the mail, just send them over there. Bank account statement from your LLC. Make sure you send those over. The LLC operating agreement. So all partners, their names, their social security numbers, so they know exactly how to divvy up any profit or loss for the partnership. The EIN for the LLC, because they're going to need the employment identification number in order to make sure the taxes get filed correctly for that entity. Full year property management statements, if you're getting those from your property manager. And then info from the spreadsheet, that kind of income expense summary, including the CapEx thing, which we just went over like last slide. Okay. Any questions on this for the documents to give to your CPA and how to do bookkeeping and accounting? All right, cool. Then getting started with Brian's spreadsheet, enter the year and days in February on the property report tab. So again, he had this thing in there. You don't need to do it anymore, but it's kind of funny that he couldn't figure out how to do February. It's an issue with how he added the days and stuff like that to do his reporting, but it's fixed now. You don't even need to do this. And then on the drop-down list, enter your property information, start entering income expense data, and that's it. I mean, it really is a really straightforward, very simple system for you to do it, and it's designed to make doing your taxes easy, because it's all categorized correctly. You don't need to recreate this stuff from scratch. So even if you decide, hey, I'm not going to use Brian's spreadsheet because I'd rather build my own spreadsheet than doing the things I'm supposed to do. You want to go build your own, right? I'd copy a lot of Brian's stuff because he really did a nice job, thought it through, and it makes it super easy at tax time to kind of have all the categories done right and kind of have it all summarized and stuff like that. So yeah, go ahead and start using Brian's spreadsheet. All right, so that's it. How we do on time? Oh, good on time. Any questions for me on of all things bookkeeping and accounting, like probably my least favorite subject in the whole world, and apparently the most popular subject according to the polls about what people want to see for classes, which blows my mind. Any questions on this stuff? Is that helpful? Did you guys get a good chance to download the spreadsheet and know how to use it for doing your stuff and getting organized? I saw someone raise their hand. I'm not sure what that's all about, but good. I think I missed the mileage and if the worksheet tracks that. Yep, just enter in the mileage for the property. I don't think it's a dollar amount. I think you just track it somewhere. I'm not sure. Where did Brian put in there? So mileage, huh? Let's see. Expenses. Does he list mileage somewhere? He might actually have you putting it in here as a dollar amount for auto and travel. So he has you track it that way. So basically you put in as an expense, auto and travel, a description of what it was for, and that. And I will tell you, as an aside for tracking mileage, that you should document where you went for every trip. It is not enough to say, oh, I traveled about 10 miles every week for this, and so 10 miles a week, 52 weeks in a year at 53 cents a mile or whatever it is. That's about this. I don't think so. My CPA is kind of a stickler. She wants us to actually use an app and track each trip and then categorize that trip as to where I went, what client I was with, or where I was going to see stuff. So be a little bit paranoid about that, because apparently that's one of the things that they audit you on. So go ahead and I'd recommend you do that. Claudia says, yes, really helpful. Awesome, Claudia. Yeah, download the spreadsheet, or you have access to the web-based one. In a lot of cases, the spreadsheet's super easy, right? We're going to be adding on some stuff to make the web one a little bit better, with being able to model things and have actual properties in there. But it's not quite where I'd like it to be, and I need like 2 or 3 years off just to kind of write the code I want to write for all that stuff. But in the meantime, you could use a spreadsheet. It's just as good. I mean, Brian did a really, really nice job with that. So, Donna says, got it. Thank you. What's the name of the app? I use Mile IQ. I don't have my phone in here with me, but it's Mile IQ. It's on the App Store, and it works great. I mean, I just keep it running in the background, and then I have to go categorize where I drove with each trip. It kind of starts and stops when it uses your GPS and tells you, you started here and went here. Was that business or personal? And you can write some notes in it. And then at the end of the year, you can download a summary and send it over to the accountant, and they do it all. Yep. And Claudia asked pretty much the same question. What's the app for mileage? So yeah, those are what I use for it. Apparently there's some other ones out there, but that's the one I personally use. I do pay a fee for it. I don't even remember what I pay now. It's probably like, $15 a year or something like that if I had to guess, for tracking mileage. And I just use it to track all this stuff. And sometimes I have to go back through and do it's like what I told you guys about not waiting too long and to do all your stuff. Sometimes I have to go back and I haven't done it in like a week or 3 weeks or a month or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, where was I going to Greeley for in this one? I don't remember why I was driving to Greeley on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What was I doing out there? Yeah, Claudia says $60 per year. Yeah, it sounds in the ballpark. It's just what I use for tracking the mileage. I think, I don't know, Tammy found it or the CPA found it or something. So cool. Any other questions about bookkeeping and accounting? What is not my favorite subject, but apparently you guys really wanted. Brian does a great job teaching this class. So if you have a chance to see Brian teach it, I'm sure he teaches it a little bit different than I do, but you get the big picture of how to go and get organized with your file system and your bookkeeping stuff and staying on top of everything. And there. You're welcome, Nick. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, if you guys have any other questions, let me know. I will try to get the recording. Technically, thanks Donna. Yeah, I'll try to feel better. I'll try to get the recording up here next day or so, and the recording will be available, open to everybody for like the next week or so, and then after that, it goes into the premium archives for just premium Nomads. So Claudia says, thank you so much. Great class. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it, everybody. Have a good night. I will talk to you all soon, and you're welcome, Scott. Super helpful. Yep. So cool. I will see you all soon. Bye for now, and I'll see you all next week.